Hello and welcome to the Slow Ready Podcast, a casual conversation about all things Goose. I'm Mike.
And I'm Alex.
And we are here to recap the latest run of fall tour shows from Charlottesville, Virginia to Carnation, Washington. But first, we have a few administrative items to knock out. As always, we have a ton of future episodes, topics, and content planned for all of you. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast and follow our socials at Slow Ready Pod on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. If you like what you're hearing, please share the show or socials with a fellow Goose friend. And last, we have some big news this week. So, of note in the Goose world, the Goosemas theme was announced as Bingo Live this week with a teaser video, which is a callback to the 2020 Bingo Tour. And if you're unfamiliar with that, I highly recommend going and checking out our second episode, which was a big Goose history and goes a lot into that and the details around it. And they also did this bingo for another Goosemas in 2022 in Broomfield, Colorado. That time they did it, it was only for the second set. So we'll see if it's for the whole show this year, maybe just one night. Still waiting on some of the details there, but very excited that they're bringing the balls back. And also want to shout out our WTED friends, who we just did an episode with as well, as they have a Night Zero Goosemas event happening down at the Poorhouse in Charleston. So definitely check out the episode. Check out WTED Radio. Humongous fans of those guys. And I'm definitely planning on being at the Night Zero Goosemas event, and I hope you are as well.
It's going to be an awesome time.
It's going to be amazing. And with that out of the way, we are ready for our main topic. So going through fall here, the live episode before the WTED episode, we were actually live in Charlottesville, and we went to that show, and that is the first show that we're going to discuss today. So you want to briefly take us through the set list there, Alex?
Sure. Yeah, so awesome to get to hang out with you at the show. Honestly, a great day. We'll get into that later. But the show started off with the Turbulence in the Night Rays, into All I Need, into I'm Writing a Novel by Father John Misty. Great cover. And then Feel It Now, Animal, Rosewood Heart, and Rockdale to close out the first set. And then short set break, go into the second one with a tumble opener, then This Old Sea, into Interlude 2, into the Empress of Organos, into the Mist, back into the Empress of Organos to close out the set with an Empress Sandwich. And then we got an encore of Turn on Your Love Light by the Bobby Blue Bland, which is good stuff. So where do we want to start?
Yeah, so I think for me, a couple different highlights to call out there. Obviously, going into the show, both of us were looking to hear Rosewood. It was very high up on our wish list. So very excited when that happened. Wasn't expecting it in the set list placement either. So we got to hug that out, and it was, totally agree. Very cool getting to share our first podcast show together as a team. So that was great. This Old Sea had some new stuff going on, but by far and away, the biggest thing to me was that tumble, which I think is having a hell of a 2024 so far. A lot of different tumbles out there that have been just stellar, and I think this one was amazing. It's got a lot of changes, and I noticed it throughout this show. It felt like a lot of the changes happening, Rick was almost like sneaking them up on us and the band for that matter. And so there were it almost felt in real time like there were some left turns, and you're like, whoa, where is this going next? So very cool tumble. And I'll pass it off to you. What kind of stood out to you about this show?
So I was at the Boston show prior. I believe that was the last time Tumble was played on this tour. It's kind of hard thinking back 3 weeks now with how many shows they've played, this insane run they're on. And that was a shorter version of Tumble, and it wasn't as exploratory as the ones we had been seeing over the summer and at the Cap. So I was a little, concern is probably not the right word, but I was thinking, this might be another short Tumble, like another 13, 15-minute version, kind of back to what we were used to from 2022 and 2023 a little bit. And no, it was a great surprise. Awesome version of this. Also, going back a little bit to that Rosewood Heart, that was probably my personal favorite moment of the show because, like you said, we had been chasing that, and it was like bro hugs all around. Like the bromance was real that night. But anyway, the real basic answer, and the one I got to go with as the real highlight of the show, was This Old Sea. And the band's clearly in tune with what their highlights are because they immediately posted this to their YouTube. And it's just terrific stuff. You could tell from the jump this was going to be a different This Old Sea than what we had heard the last few years. And it ended the main portion of the song with this extended kind of vocal woes being harmonized by the band, continuing that ballady riff. And then just kind of all of a sudden, after 9-10 minutes into the song, I can't remember exactly how long, they just pivot into this epic slow build jam for like the next 9-10 minutes of the thing. And it's really driven by Rick and Cotter there. It kind of was a seamless, easy, full band build, just nonstop that entire back end of the song. And it just peaks at the end into interlude 2, which, being at Boston, that surprised me there, but this was even more of a seamless transition, in my opinion, and a bigger surprise. And the set just never let up from there. So seeing this old C become this monster of a song that you can throw into a set, and we see it later on in this tour that you can even close a set with this thing. It's just terrific stuff.
Yeah, definitely agree there on everything that you just said. This Old Sea to me has always been like the most emotional song in their catalog, and I feel like the extra vocal bridges here made it, okay, it's already the most emotional for me, and it was borderline spiritual experience. And I also think that it really like highlights one of the big benefits of having Cotter in the band is he has this ability to kind of saunter around his kit and kind of stagger the beat in a very it's a patient approach, but it's also very busy and complex. And a lot of times, especially on this song that you're highlighting here, it leads to the patience leads to a bigger peak. And so I feel like the emotional release at the end of This Old Sea was particularly palpable. One other minor note about this set, and it may sound like a negative, I promise it's not. I very much enjoyed this show start to finish, and the songs that I got were absolutely excellent. But it did seem to me like the placement here was a little bit odd at a couple points during the set. I felt like Animal, Rosewood, Rockdale was kind of just an interesting flow of songs. And I also, Empress Into the Mist is not a natural connection that my brain wants to make musically. But in both cases, the band is so good with their transitions right now that I don't really feel like any momentum or flow was too damaged or lost there. So it was interesting to me. It's not a negative, but it's just something that when I was hearing it live, it did stand out to me like, oh, these are some interesting flow choices here.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit right after the show about thematically and set placement wise, some of these were interesting choices. And my response to you is, experimental choices are good choices, in my opinion. It's stuff out of left field you're not expecting. And that's the part of going to shows like this that I really enjoy. Yeah, maybe you could come up with some better, thematic flows here and there. But I just absolutely love this set. It really surprised me that on a small venue on a Monday, they came out firing like this. And they're not taking any nights off on this tour.
100%. They are locked in, also under firing right now.
Well, the one negative I will say about the show, and it was really the sound at the venue. It was tough to hear from where we were standing, especially in set one. A large part of that would be the people chomping on the lawn, but it was just the sound was a little bit low on that set one. It got a little bit better as the show went on, but that's just another reminder to just not talk during shows.
I don't know if I've ever been to a place like that where it just kind of it melts into the side of a downtown mall in a city proper. Like it was just kind of interesting, and you can't buy beer there just buying it. You have to buy like raffle tickets, like you're at a county fair. So I thought it was very cool to see Goose in a small venue like that. But yeah, it was noteworthy that the venue operated and was set up a little bit strange, and the volume definitely got better in set two. But early on there, it was a little bit like we can hear you, but this maybe not at the levels that Goose is typically at sound wise.
Yeah, and there was like a one bathroom situation at the place, and the line was like wrapped around the venue the whole night. So that was another negative. But otherwise, I really loved the space. It was pretty cool. It was just a matter of people talking so much in the back that it was tough to hear when the volume was a little lower, likely because of what you said. It's in a downtown setting. They didn't want it to be too loud of a show when you've got literal hotels and, living spaces a block away.
Yeah, and if it sounds like we're being negative, we're really not. We had a blast. It was a great, totally awesome time. These are just noteworthy aspects of the experience that occurred that Monday night. But yeah, amazing show for a Monday. Great time.
Yeah, the best time. So we go to the salt shed here for 3 nights. I'll prelude this by saying this was a dagger to the heart that we did not go to these shows for me. But how about we dive into night one there, Mike? You can read off the set list for us.
So night one starts off with Flow Down going into Butterflies. And My Mind Has Been Consumed by Media, which is one of the great new songs the band's been kicking around. California Magic, Butter Rum, cover of Please Forgive Me by David Gray, one of the better ones in their catalog. Same Old Shenanigans, A Big Echo of a Rose, Into Wisteria Lane, and then the third ever Jivefecta, absolutely insane, and then encore of Maduvan. What do you think, Alex?
I love seeing this set. Like, I know I've reviewed it for this episode, but looking at this, it just makes me smile. Please Forgive Me is one of the big Chaser covers in my opinion, and it's one that I really want, and hopefully we'll get it at Goosemas. But it's just peak stuff when it comes to the covers this band selects. And then having it teased again later in the show during Echo of a Rose is just amazing stuff. Like I said before, Dagger to the Heart, we weren't there immediately from the jump, night one. But it was still fantastic to listen to this at home. I had a friend there for his first Goose show ever, and he had no idea what was going on, hadn't listened to the band at all. And he was like, "Oh, I recognize the one David Gray song. This is awesome. I've never heard a cover of this good." And I was like, "F you, dude. I want this cover so bad. You don't even know what you're seeing." And then they go into that Jivefecta, which is like my other big chase as a Goose fan in terms of Goose originals. Insane. Third time ever, which I can't even decide which one's my favorite. I guess I'm going to have to decide here right as I ask you. What's your favorite Jive, Mike? Because I loved every second of this.
Jive 1 is my favorite, but I almost believe all jives are created equally. So you play any one of these three at a show, and I'm going to be absolutely stoked because it's the kind of funk vibes that I'm always chasing. So any chance that I get for a lot of funk forward music with Trevor shining as he does, I'm all about it. But Jive 1 for me, but the fact that you get all three in a row, I mean, that's the stuff that dreams are made of.
I mean, they started up Jive 1 when I was in Boston, and I was like, oh my God, might I get the Jivefecta? Because that's just, I'm going to always think that whenever I hear Jive 1. And no, it didn't happen. But I'm glad it happened for y'all in Chicago. If I had to pick my favorite Jive, I think this shifted my opinion to Jive 2 being my favorite to hear. I just thought it was awesome. Like a slight stumble in the transition between Jive 1 and Jive 2 there. Totally understandable. And then it just took off after that. Like, amazing stuff. But if you want to talk about an underrated part of the show, I think that this Butter Rum in set 1 is sneaky good stuff. It's standard start to the song, and then you kind of get into this rhythm and bass portion of it to transition into the main jam. Trevor, Cotter, and Jeff are just insane, kind of driving this thing while the other guys vamp a little bit. And then Peter kind of found this pocket in his riff and just took off with it, and it really set the tone for the rest of the song. Just like we were talking about with the last show at This Old Sea, it just felt like a collective build, slow, and then it just exploded into this really fast-paced, a little bit heavier than you'd expect on Butter Rum rock kind of jam. But that wasn't enough. I'm listening to this thing live, and I'm like, oh, man, they might just end it here. This is just epic. But no, they bring it back down, and then they find a way to ramp things up real quick to actually finish off the main Butter Rum licks that you'd expect to hear at the end of the song. So I absolutely love this. I think this is one of the better versions of this song you'll hear, especially for this year. I can't think of a version off the top of my head right now that could maybe compete with this one, but there's probably something from last year or the year prior that's probably on par, but we hadn't seen one this good in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. It's a huge Butter Rum. I think Butter Rum, it's kind of been sneaky good this year. Granted, I don't think there's been any ones that have been as big as this one was, but there's been some 14 to 16-minute Butter Rums throughout this year that have just, I don't feel like they get enough credit. But if you listen back, some of them, they're really layering on the improv there. I think for me, my highlight actually from the whole show outside of the Jivefecta was actually this Wisteria Lane. They did some really amazing stuff in it. It was some unique atmospheric moody vibes. Rick was he had like a fuzzy synthy type of tone going on, and in the middle part of it, it almost sounded like it was the Disco Biscuits, for a good portion of the middle section of the jam there. Just an all-out dance party. And yeah, this Wisteria, I've listened back to it 5 or 6 times now. It's one of the highlights of fall tour for me, honestly.
Oh yeah, absolutely terrific stuff. I can't believe I overlooked that. Just Wisteria, whether it's long like we saw in Portland over the summer, or these kind of condensed versions we've been seeing this fall, it's just been in a really good place. I think that they're hitting their stride with making these more like compact mini jams that just hit the ground running this year or this fall. And we'll talk about it more later again when Wisteria comes up again, but just absolutely fantastic stuff. Longer jams doesn't necessarily mean better jams, but in this case, I think I'd still take the Portland version, but this is pretty dang good.
Yeah, just very cool to see Wisteria take a different path than the Portland version was just barely on the outside looking in of our top 5 moments for both of us. So obviously we have that one ranked very highly. This was a completely different departure, but they're just in such a good spot as a band and on like an all-time heater right now that their ability to just maybe not even necessarily know where they're going to end up each night with these songs is just it's part of the thrill being strapped in for this ride because they're just you don't know what to expect from each version. If we're being honest here, I think night 2 of the Salt Shed is probably I mean, I haven't taken a straw poll in any of my Goose group chats yet, but I think for most people, night 2 would probably be the best of the 3. But it starts off with Mr. Action in the opener spot, a draconian meter maid, which I think is my second favorite of the new songs right now. Like, goodness, that song is awesome. Into a very nice Indian River. And then the big moment of the night, maybe of the whole entire week, is end of set 1, Western Sun and Turn Clouds, featuring Julian Lage on guitar, an excellent jazz improv guitarist. And then set 2 with Yeti, Pumped Up Kicks. That Yeti again transitioning. We got our Yeti sandwich with Pumped Up Kicks in the middle here. Thatch, Redbird, an absolutely massive brain melting factory fiction, and then an encore of Slow Ready. So much you could go with here. What do you want to look at, Alex?
I mean, you said the highlight of the Chicago run. I think the Julian Lage guest spot's the highlight of the tour for me, especially on a Western Sun. I know it's a basic pick in terms of picking my highlight, but it's just so good. Getting the Julian Lage guest spot for anyone who's from Chicago is just massive, and I never thought I'd see the day where we would get such a jazzy a Western Sun. I have just such admiration for Julian and other jazz musicians like him that can kind of take what I call acceptable dissonance and put it into songs where you're hearing these like notes that don't necessarily belong when you're thinking about like the chromatic scale or whatever, but it just piques your interest. You're like, oh, that actually sounds pretty good. That's interesting. And it just makes things sound out of the ordinary without sounding like a purple note or chord thrown in. And I just absolutely love that. And his jazzy style of playing fits so well with this Western Sun that I think Rick took notice and started playing super jazzy himself. It was almost like, they were trying to have like a rock off with each other, jazz off, I should say. And they were kind of competing with these back and forth licks where you could see that their chemistry was super great, but also they were trying to like one up each other, which was fantastic stuff. I think this is probably going to be what I revisit the most when it comes to the shows so far during this fall tour, and I just absolutely love it. And then Turn Clouds, again, fantastic stuff. I absolutely love this song, and to have it with a guest spot and a guest the caliber of Julian Lage is just amazing. But I think of the two, I would pick a Western Sun as the main highlight for me.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think forget about fall tour. This may be the moment of the whole 2024 I go back to the most. And I think I mentioned this in one of our chats, but knowing Rick's background and going to, Berkeley, where, music can be broken down in a very scientific, technical way, but a lot of times he's not necessarily using that knowledge or tools in the setting that he needs to for this band. It's not something that's really required of him. And it was just so cool as a huge like Rick is my guitar idol. Like if we're being honest, out of all the I play guitar and I look up to him the most. So to see him, so giddy and excited to be kind of back in an academic sense of music, it was just so incredible to just watch his face and his joy at getting to collaborate with someone like this and go back to that world. It was absolutely amazing. I think maybe too, though, the highlight for me here is just that this is a perfect set list, in my opinion. Like, it may get lost in the Julian Lodge sit-in, but start to finish, I mean, openers, set closers, just down the line, this is like, kind of what I would dream up. And I would say that night two of Chicago is probably the only thing so far, at least, that kind of rivals night two of SPAC for me as far as this tour goes.
Yeah, I was having a debate with some friends about this, about when I said this was my favorite show of the tour. And when I think about stuff like that, it's more about which show has the moments that I feel like I'm going to revisit the most. And on this tour, I think it's Chicago Night 2. This is fantastic stuff. I mean, it's such a good set. We're overlooking stuff like this insane Yeti sandwich in set 2, a red bird that hit peaks that we hadn't seen before this year. And maybe not the best version of the song, but just hit some insane stuff in the jam there. And then we get Factory Fiction here, a coveted rarity to close the set. And we're not even talking about that over this insane guest spot. So just an unreal show. Definitely, if you haven't listened to this, go back, listen to this whole show. Incredible stuff.
Yeah, and one other minor call out. I mean, getting Factory Fiction is, going to make your night either way, but it also being a humongous Star Wars nerd my whole life, the fact that there were Duel of the Fates teases by Rick in that, I mean, it just took it to another level. So, I mean, from start to finish, again, I don't know that I could dream up a better set list than night two, and super jealous of every lucky goose that was in Chicago that night at the Salt Shed.
Leave it to Rick to find the one good part of the Phantom Menace and figure out how to put it into a song.
Yeah, very good point. Absolutely.
All right, let's get into night 3. This starts off with Hot Love and the Lazy Poet to open, and then One In, One Out into Silver Rising, and then Atlas Dogs into Big Modern to close out set 1. And then set 2, we get a Zalt opener, Zalt, Salt, STL. It seems like Zalt sticking. Into State of the Art, AEIOU, a Jim James cover. Then we get Dripfield into Satellite, into Hollywood Nights, the Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet band cover, and then close the set with Give It Time. And then in the encore, we get an Arcadia into Zalt reprised to finish off the Chicago run.
Yeah, so a really great show. This was, I mean, night two was obviously maybe the best show of the year for me, or close to it, but this is not really far behind. It's a very good show. There's a lot of different ways I could go here. Bourne does go to some great places. It's got a big peak and then some darker Goose coming up right after that, which was amazing. But I'm going to stick with Big Modern. It is just, it's absolutely my favorite song of the new songs. I believe it is for you as well.
Yep.
And already early on, if you consider the massive masterpiece that Homedale was, and then all the different places Big Modern has already gone to, it's just it keeps moving up further and further my overall top Goose songs. Like I sometimes wonder, is it already top 5 for me? Because it just so far in its young brief start here with the band, I don't think Big Modern has missed. And this was another great example. I mean, it was all of the space sounds from Peter. He was laying on really tight patterns. Rick had some really punchy lines. And then that one takes a dark turn before a seamless transition back. But just loving Big Modern. Every set list it's been in so far, they take it to a new direction. And it just shows you that as far as jam vehicles go, I think this one is just kind of wide open with possibilities.
Yeah, it's explored a lot of different space in the short amount of time it's existed, at least for our ears. You had Homedale, which was very exploratory. You had SPAC, which was, in my opinion, the best version we've heard of this so far. But you had this version that was really exploring some new spaces and just trying new things, and really wasn't far off from those other two versions, in my opinion. It's just really cool to see them experimenting like this before a song's officially released, or, has had a lot of fine tuning, and we get to hear it. I think I told this story on the episode 4 show of ours, and my wife and I were listening to the sound check at Homedale and thinking, like, there's no way this could be a Goose original. It sounds so much like an epic Dire Straits cover or something. And we're trying to Google the lyrics we could hear through the trees, and just to see this band write something this insane that's moving up our top songs list like this so quickly is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think you even called it out. There's one part of this big modern where it almost sounds like Mario music, which is kind of a theme that's been picking up here lately. It's happened a few times since then where Peter's just leading this backbone that kind of just sounds like some cross between Rainbow Road and when you get the star in Super Mario. It's just it's really fun how many different places we're going with this band right now.
Are we sure it wasn't Luigi sitting up there on the keys playing that part? We got to check in on that.
Can't be certain.
Got to zoom in on the video feed, make sure. But going into another highlight for me, and I think about me and my wife sitting and watching this show, was the Arcadia into Zalt on the encore. That was such a crazy finish to the show. That transition between Arcadia and the Zalt riff to kind of finish that reprise from set 2 was seamless to the point where we didn't even realize it was Zalt for like a good few minutes there. We're just like, holy shit, this is an insane version of Arcadia. I've never heard it go to a place like this. And then we're like, oh, duh, it's Zalt. But just terrific stuff. And the other shout out, and maybe not my favorite part of the show, but it's still cool that they think like this, was that they brought Satellite into this set, which they were really trying to figure out where to finish off the So Ready they had played in SPAC, because they didn't finish it with this jam, and they brought it back for this show. But it had really, I think, literally been written into every set list since that SPAC show, and they just hadn't found a place to put it in the show. So they brought it in here. And while I'm not necessarily a fan of like forcing that just because you didn't finish it at a show, I think it worked well here.
Yeah, definitely agree on both those points. I love in these sandwiches where you're getting something to start off set 2, and then after it doesn't close set 2 and pops back up in the encore is like a little bit of a surprise. Maybe less so if they keep doing it as much as they've done it over the last couple of weeks. But I think it's a very neat way to structure things. But also, that was going to be my honorable mention. The drip field is fantastic on its own, but the transition into Satellite and kind of just taking those two things together, definitely a huge moment in set 2. And yeah, just another flawless show from Goose, which I'm sure we'll say a few more times before we stop talking about him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to linger too long on the Salt Shed shows, but that drip field's nuts. That's maybe my favorite version. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. My favorite version of the year. But anyway, we can start diving into the Armory here in Minneapolis before we get an hour into the episode and we haven't even gotten past Chicago.
Yeah, it's just how good of a streak they're on. We both want to talk about them as much as possible because I mean, you feel compelled to with how crazy good Goose is. And they're in the best place they've ever been as a band right now, for my money. So
agreed.
So on September 14th, Goose headed to the Armory in Minneapolis, which, just side note, one of the cooler looking venues I've ever seen. And we talked about that in our fall preview, but calling it out again here because it's just an amazing looking place. Starting off with Dr. Darkness, going into the Whales, the Killing Moon, which I think is my most coveted cover that I want to get here soon, hopefully. Rockdale, Feel It Now, Seekers on the Ridge Suite, Part 1 and Part 2, and then Animal. And then set 2 with a standard 4 sets, set 2, Creatures, In Your Eyes, Drive, Hunger Sight. And then a kind of surprising encore of Everything Must Go and Hot Tea. Kind of interesting to get two normally longer format songs in the encore. So an embarrassing of riches on the set list here. And on a personal note, this was our good friend Jamie's first show. So we were very invested in this being a good set list for her because I think she's been a fan for longer than all of us and just now getting around to finally seeing them. So we were really hoping for a good show for her, and Minneapolis freaking delivered.
Yeah, and we were giving away a ticket to Minneapolis, and the winner couldn't go. So then Jamie was the first one to answer on the post when we were trying to give out the ticket that we were doing for our giveaway. And so I believe she gave it away to a friend who had never seen Goose before to go as kind of a miracle giveaway. So glad she had a great time. But I think for people who aren't picking Chicago Night 2 in our circle, Minneapolis is the favorite show of the tour so far. Although we haven't checked in with these recent few shows here. there really isn't a wrong pick. I just think this is absolutely fantastic set list creation. The flow is flawless, in my opinion. You might not have the songs flowing into each other, but thematically and energy-wise, you can't beat this. And to get a double encore like this with two huge songs, you get Everything Must Go, Hot Tea to finish a show. insane. I'm jealous, Jamie. This is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to W Ted for giving us that ticket to use in the giveaway. Just the best people on earth. I'll keep saying that forever, as long as we have a microphone in front of us. But I think this is another show where normally I think when I'm reviewing a Goose show, I think typically my brain just goes to like what the best jams were. But this is another one where I'm just going to pass the award off to perfect set list creation. It's kind of everything I want. I think my ideal set list looks a lot like this, where you've got at least one big jam in each set list, um, possibly two in the second set, with a 3 or 4 song arrangement there. That's kind of the sweet spot, I think, for me. So, you got a humongous Rockdale in set one, Creatures and Drive are amazing in set two. And then again, getting EMG and Hot Tea in the encore is just like, it's kind of got everything I want in a show. And all the big jams I mentioned there are all noteworthy, but I think just looking at it from start to finish, this show ranks for me very highly just as overall excellence.
I couldn't agree more with you there, buddy. Just want to shout out, that's a little bit longer of a Creatures than we have gotten this year, about 20 minutes or so, if you look at the track time. And I thought it was a great way to open set two. And then on the other hand, Drive has kind of been compacted down into these kind of 20-minute versions of the song, but they're exploring spaces in Drive that are insane. Like you're topping the Cat version of this thing in every version of this fall tour in some ways, and you're doing it in 10 plus less minutes. So the places they're exploring with Drive are just terrific stuff. This might be up there. You're talking about Tumble having a great year. I think Drive is up there having a great year, and being at Holmdel and only getting a short version of it without a jam makes me so jealous seeing these other drives. Just great stuff. And you got to love it. Again, going back to that encore, you got to love it when you're close to the curfew time for the venue, and they just were like, "Oh, we got a few more minutes. Let's just go past curfew and play Hot Tea because we got like 4 minutes till curfew or whatever." Just I guess they had some flexibility there, but gotta love a double encore like that. That's a treat that this band wants to give you as much music as possible.
Yeah, definitely. You want to set the stage for us in Iowa, Alex?
Yeah, totally. So we start off the show with the Me and My Uncle cover by John Phillips. And then we go into Turbulence in the Night Rays. Get a surprising Lily's Tiger played for the first time since 2021. Great jam. Then we go into All I Need. And then a crazy version of Earthling Alien. Lead up. And then we get a White Lights to close set one. And then in set two, we open with Empress of Organos, into Green River by Creedence Clearwater Revival, back into Empress, so another Empress sandwich here. And then we get a Bob Don into Arrow and close out set two with Don't Do It by the band. And in the encore, we get another cover of Turn On Your Love Light by Bobby Blue Bland again.
Yeah, first show in Iowa, so what a heater to start off on. I mean, I had 3 or 4 different picked out here as far as highlights go, but the humongous ERA gets my vote. I mean, they are using up all of the space sauce, bouncing echoes off the walls with all the instruments. Once they've got kind of like a basis where they're kind of set up, they move into what I can only describe as extraterrestrial space funk. Like, I mean, the level of what are we calling it, digital sauce, I guess, on this ERA is just monumentous, and it's large. It is a large ERA, and I am here for it. It has been listened to on repeat this week in my house for sure.
We're a broken record here, but ERA is in a great spot this tour too. And by far the highlight of this show, in my opinion, is this ERA. This is the best funk vehicle this band has, in my opinion, now going. And again, we're just exploring new space. Cotter has added so much to like the openness and the fluidity of these funk jams that we hadn't seen before. And I find myself, even when I'm sitting down watching the show, like wanting to get up and dance, even though I'm by myself in my living room. I should probably not do that. But anyway, fantastic stuff. The other highlight, obviously, got to shout out this Lily's Tiger, as I mentioned before. First time played in 3 years. Really cool the band pulled this out. There was a kid at the show with a sign saying, please play Lily's Tiger. And the fact they're so gracious to want to appease the audience like that, and for the first show in Iowa to get such a special treat like this is just amazing. And shout out to the guys in Goose for accommodating that.
Yeah, this show is so stacked that you can only pick so much. I was a little bit limited, but Lily's Tiger, amazing. The Empress Green River Empress, the transitions there, absolutely flawless. And then just a couple other minor notes. Bob Dawn was kind of an interesting slow version. Very much dug that. And the Arrow was really interesting because I don't know that I've seen Rick do this. We've talked about it before, but kind of going through that, Wheel of Fortune carousel of effects, but doing it in Arrow was kind of a little bit, different. And we wound up in a place with that Arrow where it again felt like, Peter was laying on the Mario Kart or Mario Party vibes. Very, very dancey, but very, very cool space for Arrow to be in. Yeah, amazing show in Iowa.
Can you tell that we're massive nerds because we're making Star Wars and video game references throughout this episode? Couldn't agree more. I should have brought up this Empress sandwich. I mean, to get like 30 minutes of Empress in the show and it to just be a flawless kind of sandwich there is terrific. I did not expect it to flow into Green River as well as it did. When I fell asleep before the show was over and had to catch up the next day, and you have the set list in front of you and you're like, this is really weird. And then you listen, you're like, this is amazing. So shout out to that Empress. I think it's in a great spot this tour with these sandwiches and the experimentation with the transitions. And who isn't happy to hear Empress at a show, even if you're not doing this experimental stuff with it? So great stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on over to Utah, the Great Salt Air. This actually got moved to an indoor venue, the Great Salt Air, because outside was too windy apparently to set up. So um, we start off with Draconian Meter Maid. I actually really dig this song in the opener spot. Maybe it's just because it's risen so high up my list of favorite songs currently, but it really worked there. Going into Mr. Action, Time to Flee, Inside Out, which is a cover by the band Spoon. Your Ocean, another cover with Rock the Casbah. So Jebri can sing a little bit and he kills that always. And then into Zalt. And then set two goes into a Mudovan, Into the Mist, Can't Get You Out of My Head, the Kylie Minogue cover that has mixed feelings from people. Echo of a Rose, Spirit of the Dark Horse, Thatch, and then another double encore, Butter Rum, back into a Maduvan sandwich, closing it out. So goodness gracious, they just don't know how to use the breaks here. So where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, I want to start with, if you were born in the 80s or 90s and have a heart and a feel to dance, how do you not like this Kylie Minogue cover? I mean, come on. Everyone loved this song when it came out. And if you didn't, you're lying. So it's very nostalgic for me to hear. The jams don't always go to the greatest places on it, but I love the main leg of the song. So I'm never going to complain about seeing this on a set. But anyway, that's definitely not the highlight of the show by any means. To open the show with Draconian was very interesting. I didn't necessarily think it would work great as an opener, but upon listening back, it's great, and it's keeping up the theme of this double opener deal, so you don't feel robbed necessarily with like a new song being played that you're not familiar with. You get a misdirection right after. I think that's really clever setlist design. I think that this 13-minute-ish length, probably shorter than that with the intros. I don't have the exact track length in front of me, is a good spot for it. It can definitely jam longer. I think that of the new songs is probably the third best jam vehicle of the bunch. I think One In, One Out kind of tops it a little bit for my taste as a jam vehicle, but terrific stuff. And we can dive into One In, One Out because Mike's a hater, but we'll get into that next time it's played. And then Zalt, we get a long extended version of Zalt, and it fits so well pretty much anywhere in a set, but I love it as a closer. Just really hitting some heavy strokes on this. It's a kind of a theme of this tour again, where they're getting into some pretty heavy, loud stuff with some of these jams, and Zalt is a great vehicle for that. And then to see, again, not quite a sandwich, but having the reprise of Madhuvan to end the show after it opened set two. I love that. And it was kind of a run of shows here where you were seeing these reprises or sandwiches of songs. And I was kind of loving the streak and wanted to see how long it would go before it ended. But we'll get into that later as well.
Yeah, I actually agree with you 100% on that. The Zalt, I think, is very clearly the standout here. But it's interesting. This show actually caused me to reflect a bit because it doesn't have Zalt is, I think, 18 minutes and 53 seconds. Outside of that, nothing even is really like close to a similar length. There's nothing longer than that. So it was really interesting that, just kind of thinking a little bit more about how I feel about this kind of set where they've got nothing really like at 20 minutes or none of the like longer tentpole jams involved, but they've also got more songs, between like 11 and 16 minutes than they typically do in a set. And I still think that I would prefer to have, like a 3 or 4 song second set and at least one tentpole long jam in each set. But even if that's like my preferred method, I kind of like this every now and then as just kind of a refresher or like a palate cleanser. It's kind of interesting to at least have, every so often have a show like this where you get at least a little bit of extended improv on more of the songs in the set list at the expense of having a couple really long jams. I think it actually is kind of nice every now and then, at least to have a show like this that kind of just breaks up the flow a little bit, does something a little bit different. And it's really cool. Like when you're looking at set two, it's six songs over 10 minutes. That's they're taking a bunch of their songs out for at least a little bit of a walk, and I can appreciate it. I dig this set.
Yeah, and I'm okay with these shorter jams. I mean, they're still like not like short songs by any means, but if there's less kind of vamping going on and you're kind of getting right to the point, which was the case in the majority of these, I would say, for this show in Utah, I'm okay with that. Obviously, to be at the show where you get a 30-minute version of Drive or something and the entire thing's epic is the dream for us jam fans, but this is still great stuff, and you really can't walk away from this show being super disappointed. It's just kind of nitpicky at that point of like, oh man, I really wish we got a monster jam here, but we got lots of really great small jams, and again, highlighted by the Zalt, which I think might be the version of the tour.
Yeah, it absolutely is. The darkness in Zalt and then changing into that major key and just hitting it at a breakneck pace was just absolutely insane. But yeah, I think it's nice at least every now and then to have, just a bunch of mid-sized jam vehicles. Like, you don't have to do it all the time, but it was nice to kind of see in this set list. It's very balanced, start to finish. Everything's kind of clocking in at a decent time frame, just nothing like super, super long. So yeah, very great show in Utah. Loved all of it.
I mean, obviously the main highlight was Kylie Minogue, but no, totally kidding. But you know, if that's the low point of the show for people, I think it's still a pretty great show. I mean, I don't know how you can't be smiling if you, especially if you've never seen that before, just being like, oh my god, they're covering Kylie Minogue. Like, come on, that's great stuff.
Absolutely. And we operate from the basis that the worst show that Goose does is still very, very good. So you really can't go wrong. And we've said it a bunch and I'm gonna keep saying it. They're in the best place they've ever been in. So
Yep, for sure.
with that, I think we can move on to night one of Montana, Bonner, Montana, in the Kettle House Amphitheater. So
Kicked off Montana night one with an Atlas Dogs opener, the traditional version, into One In One Out, into California Magic, into Flowdown, and finally take a short breather between songs, go into Elizabeth, and then another great transition into Interlude 2, into Jive 1, into Jive Lee to close the set. And then set 2, we get a Pancakes opener, then a Wisteria Lane, into the debut of True Love Waits by Radiohead, and then a Rosewood Heart making an appearance again with an SOS closer for set 2. And then we get a compact version of Rockdale to close out the encore. So where do we want to start here? What's your highlight of the show?
highlight for me was either going to be One In, One Out or Pancakes. But I'm going to go with Pancakes. I think it was a really standout version of the song. It's very muddled mix in the beginning with Cotter kind of going around in circle with his busy percussion, lots of fills, and then the swampy funk kind of builds into a giant major key dance party. It was just a really fun Pancakes. I didn't watch this stream, but I've listened back to it, and I have to imagine if you were at the show, your feet were moving during Pancakes. But the One In, One Out was also very standout to me.
Yeah, great pancakes. I love that as a set opener. I think that the energy on this one was through the roof. This show is similar to what we talked about with Utah, where you got a lot more of these smaller jams. Nothing really hidden over the 18-minute mark here. I mean, Pancakes was even shorter than that. We're not stripping out the intro time and stuff like that. But you're really the longest song you saw all night was SOS, and I think if you cut out all this crowd noise time, and it's still just a show that flowed insanely well. If this is the place that the band wants to get to, I'm okay with it. But as long as we're throwing in these kind of nuggets of long jams here and there, I think we're okay. But my main standout, actually, and you kind of alluded to it, is the intro of the show. The first two songs, Atlas Dogs, you get a jammed out version here, which has kind of become more rare these days. And then you go into this One In, One Out, which is easily the best version they've done of this song so far. I know there's some mixed feelings on this podcast about the song, but I think it's an insane jam vehicle, and you're hearing space on this song that the band hasn't really touched on necessarily in terms of a main song structure jam. So I don't know what's not to love about it, Mike. I mean, you're just the hater here of the main portion of the song. I'm just giving you grief. But I the part that really sticks out to me outside of the jam, obviously, is the kind of syncopated guitar playing and vocals that go together that Rick does in the middle portion of this song. Kind of gives me those Jimi Hendrix and more lately like Oteil Burbridge kind of vibes where you're singing and playing the exact same melody, and that can often come off as very cheesy to me when other people do it, but when it sounds great and it works like it does in this song for me, I absolutely love it. So it's moved up to my second favorite of the new songs just because I think the jams go to great places and I really dig the vibe of it.
Yeah, I'm just going to clear the air here. My co-host, I feel like, is a little bit overstating my opinions about One In, One Out. So I'm just going to use this time and my platform here to say that I literally have less than a 1% issue with this song. It's growing on me rapidly from the very beginning. I think it's a great jam vehicle. So overall, I'm a fan of One In, One Out. Not a hater whatsoever. Just want to make that abundantly clear to everyone. I just have the tiniest little bit of issue of how he flatly says one out in the chorus. That is like the little minorest of details. It doesn't impact my enjoyment of the song. And Alex, I think, is taking things a little too far there. So that's all.
To be fair, that's probably the longest text discussion we had all week preparing for this episode was that little minute detail. So I just had to give you a little shot. But obviously, the Worst Goose song is still a great song in our opinions. We are those fans. We absolutely love everything this band does. Real quick before we move on, do you want to get into this Radiohead cover? What did you think?
Yeah, so man, we got jam talking and I get distracted as usual. So the True Love Waits is a big deal for me. I'm a humongous Radiohead fan, have been since I was in high school. So it's very cool when you listen back to this, how much they switched up the feel of it. I mean, it's still like the same, like general like chord progression and whatnot, but Goose adds its own atmosphere to this version of this cover, and it's very distinctly made into its own thing, and it's absolutely brilliant. It doesn't. I probably think that the original Radiohead version is a little bit better than Alex thinks it is, but even so, like Goose made this their own thing, and it's absolutely wonderful. And I think you and I are both hoping that maybe this opens the door to more other Radiohead covers, maybe some new ones that they've never done before, or maybe one in particular that they did years ago that they should bring back. I don't know.
Yeah, so like I've mentioned before in the episode, I've been trying to cure this wook flu between work trips and trying to find rest. So I fell asleep early on this show and had to catch up later the next morning. And to see True Love Waits on the set list, my initial reaction before I listened was like, that's the pick. Like, I'm a big Radiohead fan too, and I'm like, this is like the 8th best song on like their 6th or 7th best album in my opinion. Like, what are we doing here? And then I listened to it, and they've completely made it their own, and it's terrific. And it gets me excited to see the possibilities of more Radiohead covers, and in particular, "You and Whose Army," which is my favorite song to see live when I see Radiohead. And seeing that Goose has covered this in the past makes me want to hear it so bad. So put that on your bingo submissions. Or maybe not. I got other choices too. But anyway, I think it's fantastic stuff. We posted a cool clip of it on our socials, but definitely worth checking out if you're a Radiohead fan at all, or even if you're not. It really sounds very original, and it just takes the great themes you hear from Radiohead songs and expands on them. So shout out to this cover.
Yeah, definitely hope to see more going forward here. So without further ado, moving on to night 2 of Montana, we're starting off with My Mind Has Been Consumed by Media. One More Day, which is a Wood Brothers cover, which I think was December 14th of 2019. So 307 so gap there. Just lots of cover bust outs in 2024. That trend continues. Dr. Darkness into Indian River, transitioning directly into Big Modern. And then Seekers on the Ridge, part 1 and 2. And a nice hot tea to close out set 1. And then starting off set 2, we've got Yeti going into Milestone 2, Skuck's Life. And then Tumble, lots of transitions here, transitioning into Mad World. And then into Tumble, This Old Sea, the new arrangement that they debuted in Charlottesville. And then So Ready in the encore slot. So a lot to choose from here. Alex, what do you want to look at first?
Yeah, interesting opener with My Mind Has Been Consumed by Media. I wouldn't say it's my favorite opener, but I really like the song. Like it's a great stuff. I think just when it comes to all of the new songs, I think this song fits better in like a 2 or 3 slot. But still, love hearing Cotter sing. Let the man sing whenever he wants. I think it's absolutely terrific stuff. And then this One More Day cover, I really wasn't even familiar with. I got to clearly catch up on more of their old covers here because I absolutely loved it. I was scrambling to find what it was when it was live, and I think it's great. I love all the Wood Brothers stuff they do. I don't think it matches up with Atlas for my taste, but I think it's really great that they're experimenting and pulling these old covers out of the cupboard that've been kind of collecting some dust for 5 years almost here. Holy cow! But really, my main highlight of this first set, which wouldn't isn't normally a highlight for me as much as I love hearing the song, is Hot Tea. I thought this was just a great version of Hot Tea. Another one of these more compact, smaller jams than we're accustomed to for a monster song like this, a big hitter. But I thought it explored some pretty cool space, and they just kind of hit the ground running with it. And Trevor is a beast. That's really all I got to say is when Trevor is up front and loud, it's my favorite. So shout out to this Hot Tea. And yeah, what else did you like, Mike?
Yeah, two things that I feel like I have to note about this show. One, the Indian River was very, very neat. It went into like an eerie tension build near the end, and I don't know how to describe it because it was a totally new sound, I feel like, for Goose, but it was almost like either like the scary score to a silent film or like a creepy carnival music from like a horror movie. Like it was so interesting. And then, to transition out of that musical space into Big Modern, which I think I said it earlier, is just already can't miss entertainment at this point. That section of the show was awesome, but also as great as that was, and I do think that it has an argument for me to be my highlight. The other one that I just absolutely have to mention is the Yeti, because that, I mean, I'm all about the funk and dance party vibes. That definitely has it. It almost sounds like Get Lucky by Daft Punk at parts of it before they transition into the Skuck's Life. So those two musical moments felt like kind of newer spots or newer versions of spots that Goose hasn't visited or maybe explored quite that way before. So those were my two highlights from the show. But great show start to finish, and more of kind of like that balanced set list feel where everything's checking in at a not short but not long, just everything's kind of just right in the middle. But nothing wrong with that. It was a great show.
Yeah, Yeti's actually in a really cool place the last few weeks. I feel like they've been doing some cool stuff with it, even with these shorter jams on it. Really, I would have loved to have seen a way to make Hot Tea and Yeti go back to back in this set somehow because it was just such a dance party between the two of them. Having that like set break, I feel like if I was at the show, I would have just wanted to like have that continue for a longer run kind of thing. But it's nice to get it to kind of close and open the set like that. Other thing to note, real quick, is this Old Sea closing set 2 is very interesting. I know there's mixed reactions on that based on our social posts, but I think with the way that they're jamming this out now, I think it's awesome. And you don't have to always close out sets the same way with the same level of energy that you're used to seeing. I think it's cool they're experimenting here. And I think this song, like you said, is such an emotional and fantastic lyrically, thematically kind of song that to close out a run in such a beautiful place like this venue in Montana it's a terrific choice in my opinion. And I love to see more of them experimenting with slotting like this.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think some of that will just come down to like listener, bias and opinion. Do you want like a barn burner to close the set, or is something like this old sea that has more of an emotional, powerful punch to it? A little bit of it is probably just going to be your own inherent bias and what you would like, what kind of energy you're wanting to go out on. But I love this old sea as a closer, especially in this new arrangement where I think, as I said earlier, it's a little bit even more emotionally powerful than it was. So totally fine to me to end on either type of emotional note there.
For sure. So we get into the final show we're going to cover on this episode. Full disclosure, we're recording on Sunday, September 22nd in the morning. So we got a show to look forward to in Oregon tonight. But the last show we've seen prior to recording is in Remlinger Farms in Carnation, Washington. And we start off with the Hot Love and the Lazy Poet opener here, and then the Whales to follow. And then we get the coveted AUATC covered by Bon Iver on this podcast in particular. We're big Bon Iver fans. Then Earthling or Alien, and then a Great Born into Turn Clouds, and then close out the first set with Everything Must Go. And then in set 2, we get a jammier set 2. We start off with Drive, going into Electric Avenue, and then Redbird, and close it out with Hunger Sight. And we finish the show with a short but sweet Dripfield. So where do we want to start here?
Yeah, I think for this show, I'm not going to highlight anything specific. I would just like to use this opportunity to say, just in general, like I keep hammering home this point, but this band has never been in good of a place as they are right now. And I think it was all amazing to us how out of the gate with Cotter, they just seemed like they were totally in sync. But this fall tour, I think, is showing even more evidence. And even every show, it just keeps getting better. And this is the most recent show, so I'm going to talk about it here because it seems to apply. But I've never seen the band with this many different layers. It feels like they can go in any different direction. And we've talked before about how Cotter makes such a big difference with this band as far as the amount of options and avenues they can explore and that they have at their disposal in the slow and more mid-tempo pace. I think that's, obviously where he definitely makes the biggest impact in this band because they're just free to explore any different direction. But I think also what's so awesome is it's added so many different like rhythmical pieces to the band. And even just Cotter being the drummer, Peter's now contributing more rhythmically, Trevor is. And it also just feels like the band collectively, they're all contributing to the direction that these jams go to. And I feel like in the past, it used to be a little bit more Rick heavy. He would kind of, pick a melody out of thin air, which he's the best at, and the band would kind of follow suit. But now it just truly feels like such a well-oiled machine, and they're all kind of rowing in the same direction. And it feels like at any given moment, Trevor could start pulling them one way, Peter could, Cotter could, Rick could, Jeff could. Like they're just all so involved in the direction of the songs. I really noticed that very heavily in E or A last night, but it's evident just throughout every single show and every single set. They just keep getting better at operating as a total unit, pulling cohesively. And yeah, again, they're just on a heater unlike anything I've ever seen before.
I could not agree more with everything you said there, brother. We were talking a little bit before about how there might be more of these smaller jams, micro jams, whatever you want to call them. I've seen that term used on Facebook a little bit. But this ERA is 15 minutes long. It's about 10 minutes shorter than the epic version we saw in Waukee, but it's still exploring space that is unseen on this tour so far, in my opinion. And it's a terrific version. So longer isn't always necessarily better. I think if as long as you're kind of trying new things and it's working, I'm okay with it. But this set is just awesome. Obviously, we haven't spent as much time with it as we'd like because we're recording, about 10 hours after the show ended or whatever for us, not even on the East Coast. But we absolutely were texting back and forth, especially before we fell asleep on this thing. But listening back, this Redbird initially, listening to it a couple times this morning, I was like, holy crap, this one might compete with that Cap version we highlighted to start the year at the Cap when we were doing our top 5 songs of the year. Really unique jam on this one. Peter has gotten so much more confident between the summer tour and this tour, I feel like, and he's driving so much of the melodies and the ideas that are going behind these jams. I just think this is absolutely terrific. And then obviously, to close a set with Hunger Sight like that, it was a more of a smaller jam on this one than we saw like at SPAC, for instance, and maybe it didn't hit the peaks of that. But again, I'll take a Hunger Sight anytime. And when you hit the ground running like you did on this one, and you just kind of close the set on such a high like that, I absolutely love it. But yeah, there's really not much to say with this show that we haven't said otherwise before during this episode, that you're getting some of the same themes throughout this tour where there's just sustained excellence. You're seeing stuff like the double openers, like you're used to seeing the Whales open a set. It's in the 2 slot here. So you're not necessarily feeling robbed hearing a new song if you're not as familiar with the catalog as people like us. You get a Hot Love opener that's a new song, quote unquote, for this year for the band Goose. But if you're not as familiar with that song, you get a song like the Whales, right, to follow up. So you're excited as a newer fan. And then you're seeing all these awesome new spaces they're exploring on these jams. I mean, come on, we're not even talking about stuff like Everything Must Go here to close out that set 1. That just was terrific stuff too, and like had us like tearing up on our couches at home. I can't even imagine being at the show.
Yeah, it gets tossed around, that Bernie Sanders meme, a lot in the jam band world, where it's just like, how can every show be the best show ever? And I just had to use this opportunity to say, like, it's just so exciting as a fan right now to watch this whole band work in perfect tandem together. They're pulling it to amazing places, and they're working as a team better than I've ever seen them. And I just think no band is in a better place than Goose is right now. They're on fucking fire.
Well said, man. Can't say it any better than that.
And I even forgot AUATC is in here, and that may be my favorite cover by Goose, and like you said, the Everything Must Go, the set 2 Drip Field Closer. I mean, everything here is just mind-blowing, and I absolutely can't wait to see what the rest of this West Coast tour brings us.
Yeah, and last shot before we close out this episode is, we're talking about these micro jams a little bit here. I mean, this drive is almost half the length at the one at the Cap, and it's 17 minutes and 52 seconds long, and it hits the ground running. It's absolutely terrific. You're not feeling shortchanged when you listen to this, in my opinion, compared to a longer version like you got at the Cap. And they're going kind of like, not necessarily toe to toe, but it's just a really great version. Like you can't be upset hearing something like that, in my opinion. So just fantastic stuff, and I'm really excited to see where the rest of this tour goes. I know that Oregon's going to get a killer show tonight, I'm sure. Another beautiful venue, so we'll see where it goes. Obviously, you're going to hear us after that Oregon show probably, but we're very excited for the end of the September tour and see where the rest of the fall tour goes.
Yeah, totally. Trying to add as many shows as I can, because every time you're on Couch Tour watching these guys, you're just like, okay, I need to get another show on the board, because they're just, you can't miss them right now. You just got to go out and see Goose right now.
It's killing me that I have to wait till Goosemas, at least as it stands right now. I got to find another show to go to.
Yeah, we got to get you somewhere, buddy.
So with that closes out our main topic here. Like Mike said at the beginning of the episode, be sure to follow us on our socials at Slow Ready Pod, anywhere that you are on the socials. If you have any ideas or topics you'd like to hear, or just want to chime in on shows you were at, please send us an email at slowreadypod@gmail.com. We're always happy to hear from you. And we wanted to shout out and say thank you to anyone who's left a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. We see those reviews. Honestly, we didn't get pings about it until I kind of started looking at the platform. So if you want to leave us a 5-star review, we'd be so happy to read them off on the show eventually at some point. And that helps us out a lot as we're growing and trying to get to know the community a little better. So with that, Mike, send us out.
Yeah, definitely feel free to reach out. We are over here. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for the support. Really appreciate everyone. And we will catch y'all later.
See ya.